So once again, guys, I've already made a video explaining 3 through 8. All of these were simplified inequalities. And we're going to start the second video on number 9, which is an inequality. I mean, look at that. That's huge, right? I need to make this more simple. I need to make it smaller, nicer before I solve it. What do I mean by simplifying an inequality or an equation? Simplify means distributive property and or combining like terms. And obviously, on this side, we have distributive property and combining like terms. And over here, we also have distributive property. So we need to simplify this thing first. Let's begin with distributive property. I'm going to distribute the 3. 3 times z is 3z. 3 times 1 is 3. So I really have a 3z plus 3. And of course, I'm going to bring down this plus 11. So plus 11. So on the left side, after distributing, I have 3z plus 3 plus 11. And when we say simplify, it's both distributive property and or combining like terms. And we do have combining like terms. Out of these 3 terms, we could combine the numbers with the numbers. And we do this in our head, right? 3 plus 11 is 14. So what I really have now is 3z plus 14. So this entire left side that used to look pretty big and ugly now became a simple binomial 3z plus 14. I simplified it. It's easier to deal with. It's more simple. Let's do the same for the right side. Let's simplify this, which means distributive property and or combining like terms, but there is no combining like terms. So you go negative 2 times z, that is a negative 2z. Negative 2 times 13, again, it's a negative 2 times 13, that is a negative 26. And that's all there is to do. There is no other number that I add negative 26 with. There is no other z that I could combine the negative 2z with. That's as simple as the right side could get. So I'm going to bring this down and rewrite it. Negative 2z minus 26. And of course, the inequality must come down and it stays the same. What's the difference between the original one and this new one is that this one's simplified. This one looked big and ugly. This one's a little bit smaller, a little bit nicer. Simplified. My goal is to get the variable by itself on one side. I want to get z by itself on one side, but the problem is I have z's on both sides. I don't want z's on both sides, so I want to get rid of one of the z's. Which one would you guys want to get rid of? The 3 or the negative 2? The 3z or the negative 2z? Negative 2z is the best option. That's what I would do. I want to get rid of that negative 2z by doing the opposite, positive 2z. That will completely eliminate. But what I do to one side, I must do to the other side, plus 2z. And of course, you're going to add the 2z with the other z's. You can't add the z's with the 14. So our new inequality will be 5z plus 14 is less than negative 26. And now this is a really simple inequality that has a single variable on the left side of the inequality. So all we got to do is 2 steps. Get rid of the 14 and get rid of the 5. We're going to start with the 14. How do you get rid of the 14? By doing the opposite of plus 14, which is minus 14. We do to one side, do to the other, subtract 14 over here. Your new inequality will be a 5z less than, and negative 26 minus 14, that is a negative 40. Now, what does this really say? It says 5 times z is less than negative 40. How do you get rid of the multiplication of 5 in front of z? You're going to divide by 5. You do the opposite of multiplying, which is dividing. And when you do to one side, you do to the other side. That will eliminate. So your final answer here will be z, because the 5's canceled out. And over here on the right side, negative 40 divided by 5, that's negative 8. Okay, but does the inequality flip or does it just come down? It just comes down. Why? Because the rule says if you multiply or divide by a negative on your last step, and we are dividing by a positive on our last step. So we do not change the inequality symbol. It comes down exactly the way it is. It's still a less than. There's my answer. Z is less than negative 8. Now, if I wanted to represent this answer on a number line, it's pretty simple. You put your value that you're talking about right in the middle, a value that's greater on the right side. Now, think about it. Greater than, you have to get to the 0, then the positive numbers. So to get to 0 on positive numbers, the one on the right will actually be a negative 7. And the one on the left, going further negative, that'd be a negative 9. Anyway, this dot is going to be open. because it does not have a solid line underneath it. So that will be an open dot at -8. And which way does it go? Does it go to the left or to the right? It goes to the left. Why? Because this is a less than symbol. It says z is less than -8. Anything on the left side is less. Anything on the right side is greater. Or another way of looking at it, if you have the variable on the left side, look at this inequality. Where's the point at? The point is on the left side of it, which means that it has to point to the left. So open dot pointing to the left. That is a fun question. Let's try another. Number 10. Dang, that's a big ugly one. We need to make it nicer, make it simple. How are we going to make it simple? By simplifying it. How do we simplify? By doing distributive property and or combining like terms. And when you simplify, it's good to simplify one side at a time. I'm going to ignore the right side and just focus on the left side. Is there any distributive property? Absolutely. This positive 2 is going to get distributed. 2 times 4r is 8r. 2 times 2 is 4. So I really have 8r plus 4. I'm going to bring down this 3r. And what is happening between the 3r and the 8r? We're not multiplying. There's obviously an addition there. So I'm going to put a plus sign right there, especially because that 8r is positive. So I'm going to put a plus sign. So I really have these 3 terms, 1, 2, 3. And I need to combine like terms after doing distributive property. So I could combine the r's with the r's. I have a 3r and an 8r. So I'm going to combine this 3r plus the 8r. That'll give me a total of 11 r's, okay? So 11 r's plus 4, bring down the plus 4, is as simple as it gets. This left side used to be big and nasty. Now it's simplified as a nice binomial, 11r plus 4. So that's as simple as the left side gets. Now let's focus on the right side. And on the right side, there is distributive property as well. 2 times 6r is 12r. 2 times 1 is 2. And there's nothing else to do right there. So I'm just going to bring that 12r plus 2 down. 12r plus 2. And of course, the inequality, I'm going to bring that down as well. That's a less than or equal to. So right here in black is my new simplified inequality. It looks a lot more simple, a lot nicer than the original. Smaller and nicer. Okay, now we could worry about getting r by itself on one side. Problem is, there's r's on both sides. You don't want r's on both sides. So get rid of one of them, right? You could either get rid of the 11r or the 12r. It's up to you. I want to get rid of the 12r by subtracting 12r, canceling, subtracting 12r. And of course, you can't subtract 12 r's from the number 4. It has to be with the like terms. So 11r take away 12r is negative 1r. And then plus 4 is less than or equal to 2. So I almost have the r by itself. All I need to do is 2 more steps. I want to get rid of the plus 4 by doing the opposite, minus 4. What I do to one side, I do to the other side. My new problem will be a negative 1r is less than or equal to negative 2. Now, what does that really mean, negative 1r? That really means negative 1 times r. So if you want to get rid of that multiplication of negative 1, you're going to do the opposite of multiplying, which is dividing by that exact value, negative 1. And when you do to one side, do to the other. So this was our last step. We divided by a negative. So yeah, you're going to have r by itself. Negative 2 divided by negative 1 is positive 2. But because our last step was dividing by a negative, this inequality has to change. It has to flip. So instead of a less than or equal to, we're going to change it to a greater than or equal to. Yay? Okay. And of course, if we wanted to represent this on a number line, pretty simple. Draw your number line. Put that number you're talking about, 2, right in the middle. Some greater values on the left side, some less values on the left side, right? Greater, right, less, left. This is going to be a solid dot because it does have a solid line underneath it. So you're going to put a solid dot at 2, and it is going to the right because that is a greater than or equal to symbol. Or you could think of it, where's the point? The point is over here on the right side, pointing that way. One more. Let's go for it. So on number 11, we need to, again, simplify each side. If you look at the right side, that's a number 0. Dang, that's as simple as anything could get. So we're only going to simplify the left side. Is there any distributive property? Absolutely. There's negative 3 times n. Notice that I include the minus and call it a negative 3 instead of a minus 3. That way it's easier. Negative 3 times n is a negative 3n, which is technically a minus 3n. And then negative 3 times a negative 6, a negative times a negative, is a positive, and 3 times 6 is 18. And then, of course, I'm going to bring down the 5n that's left over. So on the left side, I now have, after doing distributive property, 3 terms, 5n take away 3n plus 18. So out of these 3 terms, I could combine the n's with the n's. So what is 5n take away 3n? That is 2n. Bring down the plus 18, bring down the inequality. We're 2 steps away from our answer. I need to get rid of that 18 by subtracting 18. What I do to one side, I do to the other side. Subtract 18. Rewrite what I have left. I have a 2n, that canceled out, is greater than or equal to negative 18. 2n is greater than or equal to negative 18. What does that really say? It says 2 times n is greater than or equal to negative 18. So if you want to get rid of that multiplication of 2 in front of the n, you're going to do the opposite of multiplying, which is dividing. And when you do to one side, do to the other. That cancels out. Our final answer is n. It does not change. Why does it not change? Because I did not divide by a negative. I divided by a positive. So it stays the same, and I end up with a negative 9 over here. So n is greater than or equal to negative 9. To graph that on a number line, put negative 9 right there. Of course, on the right side, it's greater. So you have to get to 0 on positive numbers. So that means that this next one's going to be a negative 8, a negative 7, negative 10, negative 11, going this way. This is a solid dot because it has a solid line underneath it. Solid dot at negative 9. And it's going to the right. Again, because it says greater than or equal to, it's pointing to the right. Okay, let's jump to these word problems. We'll do a couple of them. A lot of people freak out with word problems. Just remember those math phrases that we learned before in Unit 2, like less than means subtraction, but you got to switch the order. But if you have is less than, then that's talking about an inequality. The inequality less than, okay? So as we read, let's write. It says a number. What does that mean? We're just going to say that means x, right? A number is less than, okay? That is the less than symbol. So I have so far x is less than what? It says is less than 1/4 the sum of 3 times the number of 4. Dang, that sounds overwhelming. But let's work through it. Is less than 1/4. That's pretty easy. That's just the fraction 1/4. But 1/4 of what? If it said 1/4 of x, you'd put an x right there. But it says 1/4 the sum. So sum means addition. So if I said the sum of 2 and 3, you would say 2 plus 3. But it says the sum of 3 times the number, that's 3x, and 4. So what am I adding? I'm adding the 3x and the 4. So 1/4, if it would have said 1/4 of x, you would say 1/4 of x. But it says 1/4 of this junk. So 1/4 of, you're going to have to put multiplication, and I'm going to put the sum of 3 times the number and 4. So there's the entire inequality. I admit it takes some practice to read and be able to write this inequality out. X is less than 1/4 times 3 plus 4. A number is less than 1/4 the sum of 3 times the number and 4. 3 times the number and 4. Now, if you're thinking, why the heck did he put parentheses here? It's necessary because if you didn't, it would say 1/4 of 3x, and then you would add 4. But it's saying 1/4 of the sum, 1/4 of this answer of adding 3x plus 4, then you take 1/4 of it. So that's the correct way to write that inequality. And then we would have to solve it to get our final answer. So let's actually solve this thing. Again, you want x on one side, but you have x's on both sides. So we need to get rid of one of the x's. The only way to get this x out of the parentheses is to distribute, right? Now you could distribute the 1/4, which is not that bad. Or you could get rid of the 1/4 by multiplying both sides by 4. I'm just going to distribute the 1/4. It's not a big deal. 1/4 times 3 over 1 with an x will be 3 over 4 with an x, right? 1 times 3 is 3. 4 times 1 is 4. 3/4 with an x. Now, when I distribute 1/4 times 4 and put that over a 1, that's easy. 1 times 4 is 4. And on the bottom, 4 times 1 is also 4. And of course, we have a plus sign right there. And 4 over 4, we could actually do that becomes 1. So I have a 3/4 x plus 1. And I have the greater than symbol and I have the x on this side. So now I have x's on both sides, and I want to get x on one side. But the problem is you might get confused with this fraction, right? So you could get rid of this fraction by multiplying everything by the denominator, which would be 4, right? Times 4, that would cancel out. Times 4 times 4. You're going to end up with 4x is less than 3x plus 4. And finally, we're going to move that 3x over to the other side, minus 3x, minus 3x. That'll give you a 1x is less than 4, and that's technically your final answer. On a number line, there's 4. It's an open dot at 4 going to the left. So let's go back to the original question and put that answer on there. X is greater than 4. So the answer is x is greater than 4. Yeah, so this video is getting long. I'm just going to stop it right here. And these exact type of questions will be on the quiz Friday and on the test next week.